On today's show, the Houston Rockets dominate the San Antonio Spurs behind a career night from Alperen Sengun. How he was so effective on both offense and defense, what the Rockets did to neutralize Victor Wembanyama in this game, as well as Cam Whitmore with a huge spark off the Rockets bench, and so much more. We're going to get to all of it on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
Throw it up to Jalen Green.
Sengun here in the short row. Oh my, that's the no look.
Jabari for three and the win. Yeah!
Look at Tari, Eason.
Here comes Tari. No!
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
The Houston Rockets select Thompson and Cam Whitmore.
One thing I have never done is not made the playoffs, and so we want to take that step here as well.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
45 points, 16 rebounds, 3 assists, 5 steals, and a block in Alperen Sengun's best game of his NBA career. What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin. The show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube, where I want your thoughts. Tell me in the YouTube comments your thoughts about this game. The best game of Sengun's career, dropping 45 on Wemby's head. My goodness. Only 2 players have scored 40 or more against Victor Wembanyama this season. That's Joel Embiid, who dropped a 70-piece, and now Alperen Sengun. A hell of a game. Can't wait to talk about it. As always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for being an everydayer and making the show part of your day every single day. So much to get to from this one. And if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see there's a little, I got to point the right direction. The Rockets are currently the owners of the NBA belt. So if you are unfamiliar with what the NBA belt is, at the start of every season, it's a fun little game to play, and Locked On has made it an official part of the network. The Rockets have had a couple different chances to earn the belt this season, but unfortunately were unable to do so until this moment. The NBA belt is essentially coming into the season. The owners of the NBA belt are the NBA champions from the previous season. So it was the Denver Nuggets starting this year. And anytime a team beats the team who owns the belt, they then take over the belt. And so the San Antonio Spurs took over the belt from, who was it? The OKC Thunder recently in their win against the Thunder, and so they were owners of the belt. They defended the belt against the Indiana Pacers, and now the Rockets own the belt. So the Rockets immediately have to defend their belt against the LA Clippers, since it's playing the Clippers on a second night of a back-to-back, all that good stuff. But for now, the Rockets can revel in being owners of the NBA belt. It's a fun little thing to follow along with. But the reason the Rockets won this game, the reason, there were a lot of reasons, and they did some good things, and we're going to talk about the game in its entirety, but Alperen Sengun was on another level in this one. Said it at the top, but 45 points on 19 of 32 shooting, 16 rebounds, 3 assists, 5 steals, 1 block, only a couple turnovers, 2 of 3 from downtown, 5 of 7 at the charity stripe. This was definitively the most dominant and best game of Alperen Sengun's young career. And to have it happen against the Spurs and against Victor Wembanyama, who has been not anything less than sensational throughout his rookie campaign, says a lot, right? The 2 of the best young big men in the NBA going head to head, and Alperen Sengun absolutely got the better of him, right? He bullied Victor Wembanyama in this game. He bullied whoever was guarding in this game. It didn't matter if it was Wemby, didn't matter if it was Zach Collins, didn't matter if it was on a switch. The Spurs had zero answer for Alperen Sengun. A big part of that, curiously enough, was the Spurs deciding that they wanted to just allow Wemby to guard him in single coverage, or allow Zach Collins to have him in single coverage. This is the first time in a long time that we've seen a team elect to guard Sengun in single coverage, and he went to work. It didn't matter. Now, I will say there were points. There were some points early on in the first quarter, and there were even some points in the fourth quarter where Victor Wembanyama got the better of Alperen Sengun, right? Victor Wembanyama left this game 10 points, 11 boards, 7 blocked shots. We're going to talk about his offense and his overall impact in this game and how the Rockets were able to kind of neutralize Wemby in this one, scoring all of his points in like the first 13 minutes of the game. Went without a field goal for an extended period, didn't score another point after like early second quarter. But defensively, Wemby still had like 4 or 5 of Wemby's 7 blocks still came against Alperen Sengun. There were still moments where Sengun would make a move, try to attack, and it would result in a Wemby block. But those moments came few and far between in the moments where Sengun was actually able to be effective and score on Wemby. And the reasons for that, I think it's twofold. One, Sengun has this incredible ability to size up his opponent. We've seen Sengun score in this game against Victor Wembanyama. We've seen him score against Giannis Antetokounmpo. We've seen him score against LeBron James. We've seen him score against Embiid, against Jokic, against, pick your poison. Sengun has been able to score against anybody in the NBA. When he's allowed to just go at somebody, individual, single coverage, there and look, sometimes the defender's going to get the better of you. But what I loved about this game is that early on, Wemby had I think a couple, one or two early blocks on Sengun, Sengun, a couple missed shots here or there, whatever. And it wasn't like a fantastic start for Sengun, but the Rockets stuck with him. And that was the part that I loved the most about this, is they didn't go away from Sengun. So too often this season, we've seen a game where maybe Sengun gets a couple touches early, or he misses a couple of his usual shots, or he gets denied at the rim, or it's a turnover or whatever. And the Rockets immediately, they go away from him. They're like, oh, he doesn't have it tonight. He's struggling. And then they start trying to find other avenues to generate offense. This game, I think, shows that the best way to generate offense is to just go to your best player. It makes the most sense, right? Go to your best player. He's going to take care of you. Even in the fourth quarter, when Wemby was started to be a little bit more aggressive, he was playing through foul trouble in this game. But even in that fourth quarter, he got the better of Sengun on a couple different possessions, and it didn't matter. The Rockets kept going back to him. They kept feeding him, and he had so many insane possessions in this game. And a large part of his success, the possessions where he did have success against Wemby, was his ability to size up Wemby and understand, okay, if I put him in this spot on the floor, if I get to this spot, if I use my body to shield him off. He did that a lot in this game, where he would, post him up, get to his spin moves, get him right. Like, he put Wemby right under the basket so many times in this game, and then used his body to back him out away from the basket to shield him so that he wouldn't get blocked and then go up and finish off the glass. Or he had the one where he backed Wemby down and got into a spin move and then pump fake once, pump fake twice, made sure that Wemby wasn't going to be able to stuff him, and he was right under the basket, and then went up for a little corkscrew kind of dunk. That one was incredible. And I think by far my favorite play of the evening wasn't even a bucket that Alp scored, because it still showcases his ability to get his teammates involved. And that was late in the fourth quarter. The Rockets pushed the ball up the court. Fred VanVleet was pushing and got the ball to Sengun. He was flashing through the lane, and Sengun had the ball for all of not even a second, and did a beautiful, behind the back wraparound pass, bounced it over to Cam Whitmore, who was cutting in from the perimeter, and Cam just elevates and completely dunks it home. So this was a game where the Spurs elected to guard Sengun in single coverage, and Sengun absolutely took advantage of that. He dominated Wemby. He dominated Zach Collins. And this, it feels weird saying it, this was like a vintage Sengun game. This was a game that we hadn't seen in a while from Sengun, where he looked absolutely dominant. And I'm glad that we got it, because he's the star of this team, right? And it feels good to be able to see that again, to see that insane level of play from him. and to also see how the rest of the Houston Rockets were able to feed off of that play, how Fred VanVleet's play was able to be elevated by Sengun, how Jalen Green was able to play off of Sengun's gravity in this game, Cam Whitmore as well. A lot to get to in this one, as well as just some of the general game flow, why this game felt a lot closer than it probably needed to feel over the course of 48 minutes. Just some of the general game flow vibes, talk about some of the other contributors, Fred, Jalen, Cam Whitmore off the bench. Yeah, gonna get to all of that here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball, talking about the Rockets' 114-101 win against Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs. Now, some of the general feel from this game, it was actually kind of weird, because first handful of minutes, right? Wemby had, shot at the rim, had a three, he scored 5 of his 10 points within the first couple minutes of the game, and it looked like he was about to be on one, and it was kind of scary. But what the Rockets were able to do over the course of this game is they were really disruptive with Wemby, and I thought that he wasn't ready for the physicality in which the Rockets guarded him defensively. The Rockets actually elected at various points to switch up the primary defender on Wemby. At certain points, a lot of the game when he was on the floor, Dillon Brooks was Wemby's primary defender, but they also elected to guard him with Sengun for stretches. They guarded him with Jock Landale. They guarded him with Jabari, and they willingly switched all the actions against the Spurs defensively. And I thought that was an interesting game plan approach with Wemby, and I thought the Spurs did a terrible job of taking advantage of when smaller players were switched on to Wemby, because there were points where, Fred VanVleet was on him, or Jalen Green was on him, or, different bench guys, Thompson, Cam Whitmore. They really were just we're comfortable with anybody guarding Wemby, and we're going to switch everything, and they were extra physical with him, especially when Dillon Brooks was on him. I thought the Rockets and Dillon Brooks did a great job, at least defensively, making Wemby uncomfortable. We saw the various points where when the Spurs did try in the first half to get Wemby involved offensively, having Dillon pressed up on Wemby on the perimeter, not letting him get to his spots. He didn't use his size at all. I thought the Rockets did a really good job of eliminating Wemby on the roll, not letting the Spurs kind of spoon feed him. That's why did I struggle saying that so much? Spoon feed him buckets over the top of the defense. I don't think we saw a single Wemby lob in this game, or just a play where Devin Vassell or Branham or whoever, Sohan, kind of getting downhill and then pitching the ball over the top to Wemby. The Rockets' game plan, it felt like, was to shut down Wemby and make other guys beat you. And unfortunately for the Rockets, some of the other guys really did show up in this game. Malachi Branham was really good in this one. 20 points, 8 of 14 shooting off the bench for the Spurs. Keldon Johnson, 18 points on 5 of 12 shooting, slightly less efficient. And kind of across the board, that was kind of the story, is the Spurs had some guys make some key shots. They had some key contributions over the course of this game, and it felt like the Spurs got a lot of really timely shots, especially there, in the third quarter, in the fourth quarter, to kind of every time it felt like the Rockets were going to be able to pull away and start creating some, separation, making, generating some space, creating a little bubble to be safe, the Spurs would have a three or a couple layups, or they'd go on a run. They went on a 7-0 run to end the third quarter to kind of get them back into this game. And that came off of a really impressive second quarter where the Spurs actually outscored the Rockets 32-21 in that second quarter, in large part due to the lineup that the Rockets ran at the top of the second quarter. It was not a great lineup. Jock, Landale, Jabari Smith Jr., Amin Thompson, Cam Whitmore, and Jeff Green. I thought that lineup actually had a lot of potential because they had a lot of size on the floor, and I thought they were going to continue to kind of embody that physical, that physical dominance that it felt like the starters felt like they brought a lot of physicality to this game. And the starters had a good start to the game, 26-21 in the first quarter. And it really felt like the starters brought the right energy, right? They had a good start to the game. Fred VanVleet had a quick 9 points in the first quarter. He was nailing all his outside shots. More on him in just a second. But things kind of turned around there in that second quarter, unfortunately. And a big part of that was Jabari Smith Jr. and Dillon Brooks were both kind of non-factors offensively. And so Jabari, with that second unit, just couldn't get anything done offensively. Amin Thompson really struggled offensively in this game. He was doing all the other little things he usually does, rebounding, making hustle plays, defending at a high level, but really struggled to get it going offensively. And Cam Whitmore unlocked his offense there in a big way in that fourth quarter. Also, again, playing off of Alperen Sengun there in that fourth quarter, kind of unlocking a lot for him. But overall in this game, I liked the Rockets' defensive approach to Wemby, and the main defensive thing that I liked about this Rockets team, and we saw this back in the Suns game as well, is just quick hands, generating steals, forcing turnovers, and wreaking havoc defensively to then get out in transition. The Rockets forced 19 Spurs turnovers and generated 28 points off of those 19 Spurs turnovers. The Rockets were running and gunning and moving with purpose in this game. And that's why, even though the Rockets elected to guard Wemby with kind of whoever, right? He had different primaries throughout the game, but they felt safe guarding him with whoever on switches because they were so active in the passing lanes. They knew that, okay, cool, if we switch this action, and have a smaller player on Wemby, they're going to try to get him the ball. What do? We play the passing lane. And they had so many deflections, so many tipped passes, so many straight up steals. Like Alperen Sengun was fantastic in this game, even on the defensive side of the ball, walking away with 5 steals in this one because he tipped the ball away from Wemby so many different times, right? They would try to get him the ball, and Wemby would start to try to go to work on Sengun, and Sengun would he's got those quick hands, right? Those insanely quick hands, and would deflect the ball, tip the ball away on an entry pass or on a post up for Wemby, or if he was facing up even. So I thought the team, by and large, did a really fantastic job. Fred VanVleet as well, 4 steals for him. Dillon Brooks had a couple steals. Jalen Green had a steal, and then kind of a hodgepodge of steals up and down the lineup elsewhere. But between the steals and being able to get out in transition, or the blocked shots and being able to get out in transition, the Rockets really they ran San Antonio out of the gym in this one, and they generated a lot of really easy transition opportunities by doing so. And that's where Jalen Green, it felt like, was really effective in this game in particular, because he had 23 points on 11 of 23 shooting. He was not effective from outside the three-point line, unfortunately. He was only 1 of 10 from behind the arc, but where he was effective was getting downhill, whether it was in transition or even he had moments in the half court that I thought were really encouraging, where he had the ball on the perimeter and either used his lightning quick first step and got to the rim and finished with ease. If the Spurs were spaced out to the three-point line and he had kind of an open lane to drive and attack, he even had moments where that I thought were encouraging, where he was probing the lane, where he would attack or bring the ball up in transition, kind of probe and see how the Spurs defense was going to be set and kind of wait for a window to attack and then go in and get to the rim and score. And so even though he was 1 of 10 from outside, that means that he was 10 of 13 inside the three-point line. And so it's another one of those games where we see, okay, one half of Jalen Green's game looks incredible, the other half not so much. And it's frustrating because you do see the ease with which Jalen generates his own shot opportunities. And in this game, he got to his step back three-pointer, 3 3, 4, 5 different times in this game and missed every single one, unfortunately. And so you start to think about, those games like he had against the Phoenix Suns where he couldn't miss. And if he's able to put together, the games where he's able to score at all 3 levels effectively, then you're like, oh, that's the Jalen Green that we hope we can get on a consistent basis. Shot wasn't falling in this one. He was still able to be effective on both sides of the court. I thought he did a great job defensively, on the players that he was guarding, as well as just trying to find a way to be effective on offense, even though the shot wasn't falling outside, right? It could have been a thing where, Victor Wembanyama's in the game, he's going to be afraid to drive, or he's going to settle for mid-range shots, or just continue to settle for the shots outside on the perimeter. No, he drove the ball in, and he finished, he had the great finishes where he just used his speed and didn't have to play through contact. He had a couple finishes that were through contact on Wemby, on Zach Collins. Just an overall impressive downhill game for Jalen Green. It's unfortunate that he wasn't able to pair it with a better outside shooting performance. But coming up, also want to talk about Fred VanVleet and Cam Whitmore. Their production in this game, couldn't have done it without them, as well as final thoughts from this one. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. And it's important to let that stuff out, especially to someone who's unbiased when it comes to your life. Because when you have frustrations like that, when you bottle things up, right, it can boil over at the wrong moment, and you can, explode on the wrong person. You don't want to keep those things inside, right? It could be, maybe you were frustrated at work, or you had a disagreement with a coworker, or it could be something in your personal life, right? With your partner, or with a loved one, a family member, where there's some tension there for whatever reason. And it's important to be able to discuss these things. I've done therapy in the past, and I found it to be an incredibly cathartic experience to be able to talk to an unbiased individual about the problems that I'm facing in my own life. Therapy can be different for everyone, and let's be honest, most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports teams and what's going on with them, and it's important to get those things off your chest every once in a while. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, as far as some of the contributions from the other guys, I didn't get a chance to talk about it when I segued into Jalen there at the end of last segment, but there were moments in this game where I thought Jalen's patience was really key, especially getting downhill and attacking the rim, where there were 2 plays that stood out in particular, and one was a display of patience and one was a display of unselfishness. The first of which was him driving, or I apologize, Sengun had backed down Zach Collins, basically, brought the ball up, walked the ball up himself, and just kind of walked it all the way in on Zach Collins, had him, almost dead to rights under the rim. And as he was posting up and making his move, Jalen flashed through the lane. So Sengun pitched the ball back to Jalen. And in that moment, Jalen then drew 2 because Jalen had his defender trailing him, and then Zach Collins peeled off of Sengun to try and stop whatever Jalen was going to do at the rim. And Jalen, rather than forcing up a contested shot at the rim, he had the foresight to then immediately, like he had the ball for not even a second, immediately pitched it back over his shoulder to Alperen Sengun, who was able to then go up for an easy 2 at the rim. That was how I thought that, the gravity from Sengun, right, opened things up, Jalen was able to cut through the lane, and then Jalen was able to return the favor and get it back to Sengun for an easy 2, and it was an and one opportunity right there at the rim. Sengun hit him with the flex cam after the finish. Loved that play because that was a great basketball play. That was a high IQ, great move from Jalen to understand, hey, yeah, LP fed me the ball, and yeah, I have a shot at, maybe making a slashing layup right here. But he turned what could have been a good opportunity into a fantastic opportunity by getting the ball back to Sengun. And then there was another play earlier in the game where it was a empty corner pick and roll, so no shooter in the strong side corner, and Jalen and Sengun are running pick and roll, and the way that Sengun set the screen, he kind of was drifting towards the paint. Jalen had this whole, right side of the court to work with, and he was staring down Victor Wembanyama, But because of Sengun and his role towards the rim, Wemby was caught between sticking with Jalen Green or tagging Sengun and making sure that the pocket pass didn't get to Sengun and Sengun could just score an easy 2 at the rim, because they'd been feeding Sengun all night, whether it was Jalen, whether it was Fred, just constantly feeding Sengun with those little pocket passes on the roll so that he can go to work in the paint. And because of that, Jalen delayed for just a second, right? He was kind of probing for a second, waiting to see what Wemby was going to do. And as Jalen kind of froze, he basically froze Wemby out for a second. And then Wemby decided to tag Sengun, thinking that Jalen was going to go back to him. And then Jalen just turned on the jet boosters, right? And then finished right there at the rim with 0 contest from Victor Wembanyama. So I love those 2 moments from Jalen, because it shows you a little bit of how playing off of Sengun, how using his gravity can unlock things, but it also requires a level of awareness and patience to play off of Sengun's gravity, right? But it can make life easier for other guys. So I thought that in those 2 moments, Jalen did a great job kind of reading the defense, reacting to what the defense was going to give him. And again, even though Jalen was 1 of 10 shooting in this game, I really didn't think that he was forcing anything, right? The shots that he got within the offense, right? The downhill drives, the transition opportunities, even the threes that he was getting, a lot of them were just wide open shots that came kind of within the flow of the offense. There were some that he generated himself, right? Step back opportunities that could have maybe turned into other shots, better shots for his teammates, since he just didn't have it going outside. But I largely didn't have a problem with the shots that he was taking in this one, especially because Jalen's very much a player that can shoot himself out of a funk. And just the way that we ended with him shooting 1 of 10, we could have also ended with him shooting, 3 of 10 or 4 of 10 or 5 of 10 if he had caught fire at any point during this game, because Jalen's that kind of player where he sees 1 or 2 shots go down, and then you can have one of those insane quarters where he goes, for 10 plus points, 15 plus points in a given quarter once he catches fire. So I liked his approach to this one. I liked his patience, and I liked his ability to make sure to continue to get Alperen Sengun involved. It very much felt like that was a directive from the coaching staff to continue to feed Alperen Sengun, and it worked in this game, and he had a career-high 45. It was fantastic to witness. Fred VanVleet was also integral in this game. I felt like he did a good job getting the Rockets off to a good start. Talked about his early offensive production there in that first quarter. The game as a whole, he had 21 points, 10 assists, so yet another 20-10 night for Fred VanVleet. Talked about the 4 steals earlier, his defensive contributions. He was 8 of 15 shooting, 5 of 9 from three-point land. And he had some very key mid-range buckets there in the fourth quarter to kind of calm things down for the Rockets as they were, I wouldn't say reeling, but at one point there in the fourth quarter, the Spurs did cut it to, 92-88. So a 4-point game, and Ime Udoka even called timeout. Now, unfortunately, it was a good timeout by Ime Udoka, and Ime did some good things in this game. He elected to go with Reggie Bullock there in the second half to kind of help with the floor spacing with that second unit. Because again, the second unit that I mentioned earlier with Cam, Amin, Jabari, Jeff Green, and Jock Landale really dug the Rockets into a hole. They were a -6 in their minutes. Then you replace Jock Landale with Alperen Sengun, and it didn't get much better. They were a -7 with that lineup, unfortunately. So the bench units there in that second quarter really killed the Rockets. So Ime kind of adjusted, went away from Aaron Holiday, went away from Jeff Green, and didn't go back to them in the second half because they just didn't quite work out there in the first half. And he gave more minutes to Cam Whitmore, right? Cam, who was sensational in this game, rewarding his play. But at that point, the 92-20 and the 92-88 marker, Ime called timeout. He tried to, settle the troops down, calm things down a little bit. I thought it was good because it felt like the Spurs had a lot of momentum in that moment in the game late in the fourth quarter. And they came back and they immediately had a 5-second violation on the inbounds play. So that's not what you want to see if you're the head coach, is to call a timeout, to draw something up coming out of the timeout, and then to turn the ball over. That was a bit brutal. But the Rockets were able to kind of rally. They were able to settle things down in that fourth quarter. Liked that Fred was able to kind of pick and choose his spots and get to some of those mid-range buckets. But it really felt like this was, I mentioned earlier a vintage game from Sengun, but this is the kind of game where you see when Fred has it going, when Fred is able to knock down outside shots and keep the defense honest, it does open things up a lot more for Alp. And it's kind of a two-way street, right? Sengun was dominant in this game, which opened things up for his teammates. There were so many opportunities where Sengun would have the ball down low, and the Spurs weren't doubling effectively in this game, but sometimes, Sengun would draw a second defender and be able to kick it out for a wide open shot. And a lot of those open shots weren't landing early in this game. They started to convert a little bit more later on. The Rockets still didn't shoot great from behind the arc in this game, unfortunately. 9 of 34 shooting on the evening. Fred was basically all of the Rockets' three-point shooting, and he hit 3 of them early in the game, in the first quarter. So the Rockets were able to win despite the lack of three-point shooting, and that was in large part due to Alperen Sengun and just carrying the scoring burden, especially there in that fourth quarter. Alp had 12 points of his 45 there in the fourth quarter, but Cam Whitmore also had 12 of his 19 in the fourth quarter. A lot of drives, a lot of strong finishes at the rim, a lot of moments where the Rockets were able to get out and run in transition. They had 6 steals in the quarter, the Spurs 6 turnovers. So loved that Ime trusted Cam Whitmore to close this game out in place of Jabari Smith Jr., who really was struggling in this one. Just 2 points, 1 of 6 shooting, 0 of 3 from downtown, only 3 rebounds. Don't know what was up with Jabari in this game, but usually Jabari has been effective even when he's not doing well offensively, when he's not hitting shots. His defense has still been there. His rebounding has still been there. He's still been able to impact the game in a positive way. Didn't feel like that was the case in this one. At least Dillon Brooks, even though Dillon was largely a non-factor offensively, Dillon was still the primary for large stretches of this game against Victor Wembanyama, frustrating him. The physicality was a little bit too much for Wemby to deal with. And so at least Dillon was contributing in that regard. But it was just a rough night for Jabari Smith Jr. So hopefully we see a bounce back game for him against the Clippers. He was good against the Clippers earlier this season, did a great job defending guys like Kawhi, Paul George, even James Harden on certain switches. So Jabari had one of his better defensive performances of the season against the Clippers earlier this year. So hopefully able to see him kind of lock back in and make something happen against the Clippers on this second night of a back-to-back. But overall, a great game from the Rockets. They locked in. They were able to win. They were able to neutralize Victor Wembanyama, even though certain other players, other contributors, Keldon Johnson, Malachi Branham, Devin Vassell, were able to hit some timely shots here and there. Overall, liked the Rockets' defense and their defensive approach in this one. Held the Spurs to just 33.3% shooting from downtown, just under 44% overall from the floor. The Rockets didn't shoot much better than that, unfortunately, but they got the buckets when it mattered. They went to Sengun down the stretch. Again, Sengun and Cam Whitmore combining for 24 of the Rockets' 34 points there in the fourth quarter. A good win against an in-state rival. And again, the Rockets, I'm glad I pointed to the right corner this time. The Rockets are now the owners of the NBA belt, and they have to immediately defend the belt against the LA Clippers. Will they be able to hold on to the belt? Will we be able to keep having the fancy little graphic on the show for YouTube? Stay tuned, because it's going to be a good game against James Harden and company when the Clippers come to town Wednesday night. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast, or on YouTube, just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.